Nina was in the kitchen, humming softly as she stirred a pot of rich, bubbling stew. The smell of pepper and spices filled the small apartment, wrapping her in warmth. She was smiling to herself, her mind lost in thoughts of her upcoming wedding. Every stir of the spoon felt like a countdown to the day. She would walk down the aisle. She even found herself humming a wedding song, picturing her gown, her friends cheering, her husband waiting for her at the altar. For Nina, life finally felt like it was falling into place. But then her phone buzzed on the counter. At first, she ignored it, wiping her hands on a cloth and continuing to stir. But it buzzed again, and something in her heart told her to check. Reached for it, unlocked the screen, and tapped her banking app. The moment it opened, her smile vanished. Her hands froze, her body went cold. Her account balance showed 3,200,000 gone, completely gone. She blinked rapidly, rubbed her eyes, refreshed the page. Nothing changed. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a glitch. The money she had worked day and night for was gone. Her chest tightened, her knees weakened. That was her entire savings. Every naira came from sacrifice, sleepless nights, and hope and shock. She dropped the spoon into the stew and rushed into the living room. There he was, Kenan, her fiancé, sitting calmly on the couch, scrolling through his phone as if nothing in the world was wrong. Her voice shook as she asked, "Kenan, the money, my savings, where is it?" He looked up at her. His face was calm, too calm. Instead of looking surprised or guilty, he simply gave her a cold smile. "I had to make things right with her," he said quietly. Nina's brows furrowed. "Her? What do you mean? Who are you talking about?" And then it hit her. The way he said it, the way his eyes shifted. He wasn't talking about her. He wasn't talking about their wedding. He was talking about his ex. Her heart sank. Her mind screamed, but her voice was barely a whisper. "Kenan, you used my money for her." He didn't deny it. He didn't explain. He didn't even apologize. He just stood up, picked up his keys, and walked out the door. No goodbye, no hesitation, no shame. The door closed behind him, and silence filled the room. The only sound was the stew, bubbling softly on the stove. But for Nina, the world had stopped. Her dreams of a wedding, of building a life together, of love and safety, all shattered in seconds. She didn't cry, not immediately. Her body felt numb. Her mind was racing, trying to understand how the man she loved and trusted had just stolen from her. Her hands trembled as she sat down, staring at the door he had left through. The man who had promised her forever had just destroyed her trust. In one moment, Nina had worked for years to build that savings, and now it was gone, not by fraud, not by mistake, but by the very person she thought was her future husband. In that moment, Nina didn't just lose money, she lost her peace. She lost her plans. She lost her belief in love. Her heart felt empty, her body weak, and her soul. It felt like it had just been slapped awake. Love had blinded her, but her banking app had opened her eyes. Nina sat on the couch for hours, staring into the empty air. The walls of her apartment felt like they were closing in on her. Her phone lay beside her, buzzing with notifications, friends checking in, bridal designers sending updates, family members asking about preparations. But she couldn't move, she couldn't answer. Every vibration of the phone felt like a reminder of her shattered future. When night finally came, Nina didn't cook, she didn't eat, she didn't even change her clothes. She crawled into bed and stared at the ceiling, her mind replaying the scene over and over again. Kenan's calm face, his cold words, the way he left without looking back. Sleep refused to come. Instead, tears trickled silently into her pillow. By morning, reality set in heavier. The stew she had left on the stove was burnt to ash. Her head ached from crying, her eyes were swollen. But the worst pain came when she checked her phone again. Kenan hadn't called, he hadn't texted, he hadn't even tried to explain. And then the whispers started. Her neighbor, Mrs. Oka, stopped her in the hallway. "Oh, Nina, my dear. I saw Kenan yesterday. He was driving around town with a young lady in the passenger seat. They looked very close." Nina's stomach twisted, her heart raced. "A young lady," who Mrs. Oka shrugged. "I don't know her, but she wasn't you." That was all it took. The tears she had been holding back broke free right there. In the hallway, she rushed back into her apartment, locked the door, and sank to the floor. Her mind screamed questions. Why would he do this to her? Why wasn't she enough? Why did he take everything she had worked for and give it to someone else? Days passed like shadows. Nina stopped going to work. She ignored calls from her boss, her friends, even her mother. She couldn't face anyone. How could she explain that her fiancé had not only betrayed her but had stolen her entire savings? Her once bright apartment turned into a prison of silence and sorrow. The curtains stayed closed. The fridge emptied. Her hair grew untidy. At night, she lay awake replaying every moment of their relationship. She remembered the way Keenan used to bring her flowers, the promises he whispered about their future, the nights they laughed until morning. Had it all been a lie? Her chest ached with every memory. Love, which had once felt like her anchor, now felt like a chain dragging her underwater. And the hardest part, she still missed him. Even after everything, a part of her longed for him to walk through the door, hold her, and say it was all a mistake, that he was sorry, that he still chose her. But deep down, she knew he wasn't coming back. Not for her, not for their future. Instead, Keenan was out there, living freely, enjoying life with another woman funded by Nina's blood, sweat, and tears. The thought was unbearable. It hollowed her out until she was nothing but an empty shell. By the end of the second week, Nina barely recognized herself in the mirror. Her cheeks were sunken, her eyes dull, her spirit broken. She whispered to her reflection one night, "Maybe love is not for me. Maybe I was a fool all along." And for the first time in her life, Nina, who had always believed in fairy tales, weddings, and happy endings, started to believe that love was nothing but a cruel trap. Days turned into weeks, and weeks began to blur into months. Nina had stopped counting time. The calendar on her wall still showed the month she was supposed to get married. The date of the wedding was circled in bright red ink. Each time she glanced at it, her chest tightened. Instead of preparing for a honeymoon, Nina was battling loneliness. Instead of building a home with her fiancé, she was living inside silence and despair. Her friends tried to reach her. They knocked on her door, called her phone, even slipped little notes under her doorway, but Nina pushed them all away. Shame consumed her. "How do I tell them I was robbed by the man I loved?" she whispered to herself one night, her hands clutching her chest. She avoided her mother's calls most of all. Her mother had always warned her, "Nina, don't give everything to a man before marriage. Protect yourself." But Nina hadn't listened. She thought love was enough. Now, the thought of hearing her mother's voice filled her with guilt and humiliation. The walls of her apartment seemed to echo her pain. The laughter she once shared with Keenan replayed like a ghost. She sat for hours in the dark, hugging her knees, unable to eat, unable to dream. At her lowest point, she considered giving up. One night, as rain pounded on her window, Nina whispered through tears, "What's the point of living if the person you trust most can destroy you like this?" But as the storm raged outside, something deep within her refused to let go. A small, stubborn voice whispered back, "You are still here. You are still breathing. You are still alive." The next morning, she forced herself out of bed. Her body was weak, her spirit shattered, but she decided to take a walk. She hadn't stepped outside in weeks. The sun was brighter than she remembered. The breeze carried the smell of roasted corn from a street vendor. For a moment, she almost felt human again. She sat on a bench in the park, watching children play, their laughter filling the air. For the first time since Keenan's betrayal, a faint smile tugged at her lips. That's when she heard a familiar voice. "Nina, is that really you?" She turned and saw Ada, her childhood friend, standing a few steps away. Ada had always been the light of any room, cheerful, energetic, and fiercely loyal. Nina's first instinct was to hide, but Ada rushed forward, hugging her tightly. "My God, look at you. I've been trying to reach you. Where have you been?" At first, Nina tried to brush it off. She didn't want to talk, but Ada wouldn't let her go. She looked Nina in the eyes and said softly, "You don't have to carry this alone." And that was it. The dam broke. Nina wept in Ada's arms, sobbing so loudly that people turned to look. She told her everything, how Keenan stole her savings, how he left her for another woman, how empty she felt. Ada didn't judge. She didn't lecture. She just held her and said, "He may have taken your money, but he hasn't taken you. You are still Nina. You are still worthy. You are still alive." Those words planted a seed in Nina's heart. For the first time since the betrayal, she felt a flicker of hope. Later that evening, Ada dragged her to a small gathering of women from her church. At first, Nina resisted. She didn't want pity. She didn't want prayers. But she went, mostly because Ada insisted. To her surprise, the gathering wasn't filled with judgmental looks. Instead, it was filled with women who had their own scars. Some had been abandoned, some had been cheated on, some had lost everything. Listening to their stories, Nina realized she wasn't alone. Pain wasn't unique to her. And somehow, hearing their voices gave her strength. That night, for the first time in months, Nina whispered a prayer before bed. It was short, shaky, and filled with tears. God, if you're still here, please, don't let this be the end of me. And as she drifted into sleep, something inside her heart shifted just a little, a small crack where light could enter. The days that followed were not easy, but something had changed inside Nina. For the first time in months, she began to step outside more often. Ada stayed by her side, checking in daily, refusing to let her sink back into isolation. And slowly, Nina began to rediscover the pieces of herself that Keenan hadn't stolen. She updated her resume and returned to work. At first, it was difficult. She felt exposed, ashamed, and weak. But each day she showed up was a victory. Each smile from a colleague, each completed task, reminded her that she was still capable. The weight in her chest didn't vanish overnight, but it grew lighter. One evening, after work, she passed by a bridal shop. The mannequins in the window wore elegant white gowns, their veils flowing gracefully. For a moment, Nina froze. That window once represented her dreams, her future, but now, instead of pain, she felt something else: strength. She realized she didn't need a wedding dress to prove her worth. She didn't need Keenan or any man to validate her. Her worth was in her resilience, in her ability to rise after being broken. Weeks turned into months, and Nina found herself laughing again. She reconnected with friends, joined Ada in volunteering at the women's group, and began helping others who had faced heartbreak. One evening at the group, she shared her story. Her voice shook at first, but as she spoke, she felt lighter. The women listened, nodded, and some even wept when she finished. One woman grabbed her hand and said, "Your pain has become your power. You've given me hope." Those words stayed with her. For the first time, Nina saw her suffering not as an ending, but as the beginning of something new. Keenan never came back. She never heard from him again. But instead of longing for him, Nina began to thank God he was gone. What once felt like the greatest loss of her life, she now saw as divine protection. Because sometimes, losing someone is the only way to find yourself. One night, as she sat by her window watching the stars, Nina whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for saving me from what I thought I wanted and giving me what I truly need, peace." Her heart, once shattered, was slowly pieced back together, not by the return of love, but by the discovery of strength. Nina was no longer the woman who waited by the door for a man to come back. She was the woman who walked boldly through it, into a future of her own making. And though she didn't know what tomorrow would bring, she knew one thing for sure: she would never again let love blind her to the truth. Her story was no longer about betrayal. It was about survival, about healing, about rebirth. And in that rebirth, Nina found herself again,